The man leads a seemingly conventional life. Every morning he leaves his suburban house and his wife and young daughter, walking past the hissing lawn sprinklers to the station where people wait for trains that hardly ever come. But the world around him is changing. The summer heat is so intense that the pavements begin to crack. Railway lines swell and buckle. And now the man realizes that he is changing too. Samuel Johnson wrote, "He who makes a beast of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man." As a statement of intent, these words find resonance in the pages of Neil Jordan's obscure 1983 novella, The Dream of a Beast. In the book, an unnamed advertising executive charts his slow, surreal transformation from man into monster. Told through stylized, feverish prose, Jordan's book resists easy categorization. It's part psychological horror, part domestic drama, and part allegorical tale of ecological and emotional collapse. Through an initial series of observational recordings, which render the world of the book through static tableaus, we follow our protagonist through the minutiae of his daily life. The personal rituals and domestic routines, the daily commute, the office politics, as well as his strained relationship with his wife and child, are each detailed forensically, then transformed through the repetitions and abstractions of Jordan's writing, this fevered hothouse of florid psychoanalytical prose. Given this emphasis on literary abstraction, it's not difficult to see why The Dream of a Beast has remained in obscurity in the otherwise successful career of its author, or why the book has earned its share of impassioned detractors from those curious enough to seek it out. Howls of style over substance scream from the volume of 1- and 2-star reviews that populate discussions of the book on sites such as Goodreads. For some readers, Jordan's flowery prose and elliptical storytelling will feel like an indulgence masking a thin existential plot. Indeed, stripped of its symbolism and surrealism, the story does risk collapsing into a simple, even tepid tale of a guilt-ridden husband wrestling with his own domestic failures and insecurities. For others, however, such as myself, style becomes substance. And in this context, Jordan's experimentations with form and imagery can feel as thrilling and immersive as any narrative twist or tightly woven plot. The prose doesn't simply describe transformation here, it enacts it. The language itself mutates, becomes unstable, bends around the protagonist's deteriorating psyche. What we're witnessing is not the recording of events so much as the all-too-familiar psychodrama. A kind of hallucinatory internal reckoning where shame, lust, and loss are externalized through a grotesque bodily metamorphosis. The title makes this explicit. It is a dream of a beast, a symbolic rendering of a man's interior collapse made flesh. Despite the extensive criticisms of the book's style and tone, none of Jordan's unconventional stylizations are groundbreaking or unprecedented. We might even argue that there are shades of a more conventional ecological horror story to Jordan's experimental dreamplay. A sense that the physical world, like the protagonist, is overheating, breaking down, turning strange. The manicured lawns and surfaces of bland uniformity of the book's suburban setting begin to blur and distort. Nature intrudes, the heat becomes oppressive. The impending apocalypse, if that's what it is, feels decidedly intimate. Less the end of the world than the end of a man's carefully constructed perception of it. The collapse of nature here becoming a mirror to his own personal and moral collapse. In this, Jordan echoes the tradition of writers like J.G. Ballard and Anna Kavan, whose novels The Crystal World and Ice respectively depict world-ending events, not as genre spectacle, but as psychological allegory. In The Dream of a Beast, the grotesque transformation of the protagonist is inseparable from his emotional estrangement and the sense of spousal guilt that eats away at him. The end of the world, it seems, is also the end of a marriage, as well as of his own identity as part of that hallowed family unit. Though Jordan has been a respected author since the publication of his first book, the 1976 short story collection Night in Tunisia, he's perhaps more familiar to audiences as the writer and director of acclaimed films. films such as The Crying Game from 1992, his adaptation of the Anne Rice novel Interview with the Vampire from 1994, and the controversial historical drama Michael Collins from 1996, despite having also produced genuinely surreal, even nightmarish magical realist films, such as his masterpiece The Butcher Boy from 1997, the flawed but fascinating In Dreams from 1999, and the underrated Byzantium from 2012. It was surprisingly the work of another filmmaker who came to mind when reading The Dream of a Beast, David Cronenberg, the Canadian auteur who defined the subgenre we now call body horror. Like Cronenberg's films, such as The Brood from 1979, Videodrome from 1983, and The Fly from 1986, The Dream of a Beast explores the body as a site of psychological crisis. In Cronenberg's remarkable cinematic works, physical transformation isn't just grotesque spectacle. It's a metaphor for sickness, contagion, grief, trauma, alienation. That literal shape of rage, as Oliver Reed's Dr. Hal Raglan famously terms it in The Brood. Jordan's novella similarly treats the body as a canvas for the unconscious, a place where shame, infidelity, lust and remorse leave lasting scars. However, there are some parallels here with Jordan's own early cinematic works, which are perhaps worth discussing. His first film, Angel from 1982, tells the story of a nightclub saxophonist descending into a dehumanizing cycle of violent retribution after witnessing the gangland execution of a young woman, one the protagonist had had a previous sexual encounter with. Set against the backdrop of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, the film's drama is deeply concerned with the psychological cost of violence, as well as the themes of occupation, morality, transgression, and the concept of original sin. The Dream of a Beast may share no characters or setting with Angel, but both works explore how violence, emotional or political, contaminates the self, how guilt festers and transforms reality. An even closer comparison might be The Company of Wolves from 1984, Jordan's surreal adaptation of Angela Carter's feminist fairy tales. There, the filmmakers reimagined Little Red Riding Hood as a story of awakening sexuality and the fear of predatory men, using dream logic and mythical imagery to explore the relationship between innocence and corruption. Like The Dream of a Beast, the film frames transformation, whether a young girl's sexual maturation or a man's descent into monstrous guilt, as both physical and symbolic. In both works, the body is transformed by the changing psyche. Lycanthropy is a kind of hormonal transfiguration, as in pregnancy or adolescence, while sex and desire become weapons that can harm others, as well as oneself. Reading The Dream of a Beast today, it's too easy to see the metaphor at its centre. The disintegration of a man's life reframed through surreal imagery, and the metaphorical transformation of the self. The suburban male in crisis is of course a familiar, even overplayed trope, finding expression in countless mainstream sitcoms, as well as in films like American Beauty from 1999 and Revolutionary Road from 2008. But Jordan enlivens the tired, self-pitying male guilt trip of such stories through sheer stylistic force. His text is visual, atmospheric, unafraid of accusations of excess or purple prose. It uses motifs and repetition like a filmmaker might use shots and cuts, fixating on the sweat, the heat, the hissing summer lawns and the smell of freshly cut grass, as if each sense memory is a clue to the unravelling self. The preoccupation with surfaces, with place, with the masks we wear and the exterior life as a kind of snare or deception, only adds to the layers of metaphor and interpretation, perfect for a story that is as much about the beast within as any of Carter's deconstructions of classic fairy stories. In the end, The Dream of a Beast might not satisfy readers looking for narrative clarity or character depth in the traditional sense, but it offers something else. A vivid, dreamlike exploration of guilt, crisis, and transformation rendered in a style that feels both literary and cinematic. Like the best of Cronenberg, Carter, Ballard, or Jordan's own works, literary and cinematic, it invites us to dwell in discomfort, to read the monstrous not as fantasy, but as revelation.